exclusive conversation with Stephen Hawking.
Why do the universe and all the laws of nature exist? Are they necessary? In one sense they are, because otherwise we wouldn't be here to ask the question. But is there a deeper reason?
You've been warning people about the dangers of artificial intelligence.
I don't think advances in artificial intelligence will necessarily be benign. Once machines reach the critical stage of being able to evolve themselves, we cannot predict whether their goals will be the same as ours.
Plus, astrophysicist Dr. Garrick Israelian.
The sky is mysterious because we cannot reach the sky. It's in human nature. When you can touch something, when you can get close, then you lose your interest. And that never happens with stars, and it never happens with universe. We think that this is probably the most mysterious things in nature.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to this very special edition of Larry King Now. My guest today needs little introduction. The world's most famous scientist and intellectual, a man of incomparable genius, Stephen Hawking. Stephen is Director of Research at the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics and founder of the Center for Theoretical Cosmology at the University of Cambridge. He joins us today from the Starmus Festival in the Canary Islands. I last spoke to Stephen in 2010, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to pick his miraculous brain again. Stephen, when we last spoke 6 years ago, you said that mankind was in danger of destroying ourselves by our greed and stupidity. Have things gotten better or worse since then?
We certainly have not become less greedy or less stupid. 6 years ago I was warning about pollution and overcrowding. They have gotten worse since then. The population has grown by 500 million since our last meeting, with no end in sight. At this rate, it will be 11 billion by 2100. Air pollution has increased over the past 5 years. More than 80% of inhabitants of urban areas are exposed to unsafe levels of air pollution.
Stephen, what's the biggest problem facing humanity today?
The increase in air pollution and the emission of increasing levels of carbon dioxide. Will we be too late to avoid dangerous levels of global warming?
You've been warning people about the dangers of artificial intelligence. How seriously are governments taking this warning?
Governments seem to be engaged in an AI arms race, designing planes and weapons with intelligent technologies. The funding for projects directly beneficial to the human race, such as improved medical screening, seems a somewhat lower priority.
What do you make of Ray Kurzweil's theories on singularity? Do you think we'll see man and machine become one?
I think that his views are both too simplistic and too optimistic. Exponential growth will not continue to accelerate. Something we don't predict will interrupt it, as has happened with similar forecasts in the past. And I don't think advances in artificial intelligence will necessarily be benign. Once machines reach the critical stage of being able to evolve themselves, we cannot predict whether their goals will be the same as ours.
Will artificial intelligence ever render human society as we know it obsolete?
Artificial intelligence has the potential to evolve faster than the human race. Beneficial AI could coexist with humans and augment our capabilities. But a rogue AI could be difficult to stop. We need to ensure that AI is designed ethically, with safeguards in place.
Stephen, how will it change us?
I believe beneficial artificial intelligence will permeate throughout every aspect of our society. Imagine algorithms able to quickly assess scientists' ideas, catch cancer earlier, and predict the stock markets. AI will impact our economies, our decision-making, and our lives.
What still mystifies you about the universe?
Why do the universe and all the laws of nature exist? Are they necessary? In one sense they are, because otherwise we wouldn't be here to ask the question. But is there a deeper reason?
Have any of your theories changed over the years? And if so, which ones?
40 years ago, I wrote a paper claiming that information about what fell into a black hole was lost forever. The paper aroused controversy, which has continued until the present. The consensus was that information about what fell in should be returned in the Hawking radiation given off by the black hole, but no one could suggest a mechanism. However, two colleagues and I discovered that the information is encoded on the horizon and will be returned.
What scientific discoveries have surprised even you over the years?
The most surprising was the discovery in 1998 that the rate of expansion of the universe is speeding up, rather than slowing down as had been expected. This is said to be dark energy, but this is just a name given to something we don't understand. In particular, we don't understand why it isn't either exactly zero, or very large, or whether it is constant as the universe expands.
You're in the Canary Islands for the Starmus Festival. It celebrates science, astronomy, art, and music. And this year, the festival is dedicated to you. How do you feel about that?
I feel honored that this year's Starmus Festival has been dedicated to me. It is a unique science and arts festival, open to the public, that brings together acclaimed scientists, astronauts, cosmonauts, musicians, and artists from around the world. I have invited many of my friends and colleagues to Starmus to share in this celebration with me.
Stephen, who attends the festival and what do you discuss?
The festival is attended by the public, who come to listen to the latest scientific thinking from eminent scientists and Nobel laureates. Personal accounts given by astronauts and cosmonauts recounting their adventures in space, and to enjoy musicians and artists exploring a space theme.
You have defied so many odds to reach your age. No one has lived as long as you with ALS. Do you think about how and why that you're still here?
It's my commitment to science that has kept me going. There are questions I want to answer.
6 years ago, you told me the only thing you don't fully understand is women. Have you learned any more since we talked?
I have learned a lot about women since then. Now it is my turn to ask a personal question. You have been married 8 times, to 7 different women. Is that the triumph of hope over experience?
You make a good point, Stephen. I think the answer is yes. There is also eternal hope, and this recent marriage has lasted 19 years. It's always a pleasure to be with you and interview you, and I thank you for joining me. Thanks to my guest, Stephen Hawking, an amazing man. Up next, we're joined by astrophysicist and the founding director of the Starmus Festival, Dr. Garrick Israelian. Stay right with us. Joining us now is Dr. Garrick Israelian. He is the founding director of the Starmus Festival, is an astrophysicist at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. Doctor, tell me about Starmus and how this all came about.
Well, Starmus is a science communication festival, in which the first edition was back in 2011. It was dedicated to 50 years anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's flight. And it was quite an ambitious event because we had Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, so the first generation of Apollo astronauts, wow, joined by Alexei Leonov. And, well, it was like making a history with all these guys together here in Tenerife. And I never thought that we're going to repeat the festival after 3 years. We're going to make the second festival. And then especially having Stephen as a keynote speaker at the second festival, that was something that we could never dream about. At this point, we asked Stephen if he will be interested in joining the board of Starmus advisory board. And apparently he liked the format of the festival, the way that we communicate science through music and arts and so on. So Stephen was happy to join the festival. And about 2 years ago, when we finished the festival, I asked Stephen what he thinks about Starmus, and he was very positive. The last actually sentence, he was saying that I'll be happy to come back to Starmus if you invite me. And that's the thought. I said, well, of course, no, we're not only going to invite you, we're going to pay you a tribute. So that's exactly what we are doing now, paying a tribute to Stephen Hawking.
And this year you have guests like my friend Neil deGrasse Tyson, the wonderful composer Hans Zimmer, Brian May of the rock band Queen. Very impressive list. Why does art and science communities, do they have a natural affinity?
I always thought that science inspires arts and arts inspire science. it's my generation, the generation who grew up with music of 70s. We were inspired by bands like Pink Floyd and electronic music, and there was a kind of a relation between this type of music and science, and especially space science, astronomy. This was the Apollo era, and even singers like David Bowie, they were quite inspired by this. And later I realized that these musicians themselves, they were inspired by science, by astronomy. So there was this interesting bridge between music and astronomy, space. So then the idea was just to bring these two communities together and let them together inspire young scientists or young new generation, because the message is much, much more powerful when you get musicians, artists, and scientists, astronauts together. You really create a different atmosphere. It's so unique. So you will never see this anywhere else. And of course, Laurie, it's really difficult to build a festival like that, and especially in science, where, especially in Spain, when we don't really have much support from private companies, and basically no one is interested in supporting the science festival. So we come with some public support. But the message is so powerful, is so incredible, that we can reach people like Neil deGrasse and Brian May, and they are so happy to join us, and Hans Zimmer too.
You're going to award the Stephen Hawking Medal for Science Communication. Give me a little history behind the medal.
We arranged a lecture of Alexei Leonov in London, in Science Museum, and Stephen was invited to Leonov's lecture. Before his lecture, knowing that Alexei is a very good painter, he's an artist, his drawings are very famous. So I asked Alexei, I said, do you think it's a good idea if you can make a portrait of Stephen Hawking? And he said, yeah, I think I can do that. So we went for lunch with Stephen and Alexei, and Leonov is sitting next to Stephen, and 2 hours later, he went back to hotel, and next day he came back with an amazing portrait of Stephen. There the idea of a medal came, so we thought, okay, the best way is to paying a tribute to both Alexei and Stephen is to create a medal, science communication medal, which actually is quite unique. And it should be a medal which is not for scientists, or not only for scientists, but also for those, the reporters and film directors and musicians, those who promote science, who create arts and unique or films, and popularize science with what they are doing. So Hans Zimmer is a classical example. So his music was so inspiring in films like Inception and Interstellar.
Yeah, well said. You've worked with Stephen for years. Now, obviously, he has ALS. He's had it for such a long time. Is it difficult to work with him? What's it like to work with him?
Yeah, it's not very easy. Communicating with Stephen, of course, it takes time for him to write sentences. It may take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or even more. But the time that it takes, the time that you are waiting to hear from Stephen, that he will answer you, is exactly the time that it makes you thinking about Stephen too. So it's quite interesting. So every time that Stephen has to answer my question, whether it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I think about him. So that makes this very unique, very interesting relation between a person who is communicating with Stephen and Stephen Hawking. So it's really unique. It's so different. You never experience, you never feel this communicating with others. So that happens only when you communicate with Stephen. And then you realize that Stephen is actually the strongest person on the planet. So when I'm asked, what do you think about Stephen? I always say, he's probably the strongest person on this planet.
What separates an astrophysicist from a physicist?
Well, astrophysics is basically physics of space, celestial bodies, stars and galaxies and so on. But it's a combination of plasma physics, nuclear physics, and everything. So I would say space is a kind of a laboratory where you have all different states of matter, from super dense matter to super vacuum. So basically, I wouldn't say the difference between physics and astrophysics today. It's actually more or less the same thing. Yeah.
The former late Vice President of the United States, Hubert Humphrey, told me he asked once why we don't wonder more about the sea as we do about the sky. What'd you think of that?
I guess the sky is mysterious because we cannot reach the sky, so we cannot reach the stars. So it's in human nature. When you can touch something, when you can get close, then somehow you lose your interest, and that never happens with stars, and it never happens with universe. So everything is so distant, it's so mysterious, and so we think, and I think it's normal that we think that this is probably the most mysterious things in nature. Stars, planets, galaxies, and also because somehow we realize that it's probably something that we can never understand, and we can never reach stars or galaxies, and that makes it even more mysterious, more interesting.
Stay tuned for more with Dr. Israelian right after this. Why the Canary Islands? Why is that an important location for astrophysics research?
Clear sky, no pollution, no light pollution. I would say not even dust pollution, very rare, sometimes from Africa coming dust. But usually it's an extremely clear sky. It makes one of the third best places for astronomy in the world, together with Chile and Hawaii.
Now, June 30th is Asteroid Day. It's the anniversary of the largest asteroid impact on Earth. How much do we know about asteroids, and are they a danger?
They are certainly a danger. They are very dangerous because we probably know less than 1% of dangerous asteroids that can hit the Earth. Detecting asteroids is not an easy task because you need infrared telescopes, you need cameras, and especially small bodies that are very hard to detect before they actually get very close to the Earth. And some of them before they hit, the one that happens in Russia 2 years ago. And the danger is very high, is very, very high. So I think we need more research and probably more funding and more awareness about asteroids because the danger is there.
When you study space, like black holes or planets or massive stars, what's that effect on the average citizen of the Earth?
Well, we learn physics of the universe. We learn laws that govern the nature, basically physics. And we also learn about our own evolution, because the evolution of Earth, and Earth is one of the billions of planets that exist in our galaxy. So basically studying astronomy, we study the nature. And I would never separate, like say, biology or chemistry or other branches of science for astronomy by their importance, because they are, I think, everything is important in science. You can never put secondary branches of science that are secondary or primary. Everything is important.
In a couple of weeks, I think we're going to land on, where are we going, Jupiter?
We're going to Jupiter, Juno.
Juno.
NASA mission is going to land on,
on July 4th. Symbolic. What is the importance of Jupiter?
I think Jupiter is the most important planet in the solar system. First, because of the evolution of Jupiter was directly influencing the formation of the Earth and all small planets. So you can perfectly say that there would have been no life on the Earth if there was no Jupiter in the solar system. Not only because it was protecting us from asteroids and many impacts, but also because the evolution of the orbit of the Earth and even maybe a formation of life and everything is related to the presence of Jupiter. We know that Jupiter has influenced the formation of asteroid zone between Mars and Jupiter. And so obviously, from the point of view of formation of solar system, things would have been completely different. There would have been no Earth if there would have been no Jupiter in a solar system.
Do you think the public still has great interest in this? Certainly, there's been less interest in the astronauts after all the major, the moon and everything. Is it hard to get the public involved in this?
I think it's getting harder and harder to get public involved in this. And one of the reasons, because we are really oversaturated by information, it's because of internet and everything, media. There's so much information, the flux of information is ever increasing that it's really difficult to draw attention of the young generation or kids into science, precisely for this reason. There's so much to do in internet. It's not like back 70s or even 80s, where you simply with cinema, films, and music you could do the job. But nowadays it's fighting for receiving attention from young generation, especially with sports and films and Hollywood. It's really difficult to compete with them. It's impossible.
In recent years, there's more of a push to get more women involved in science. Are we getting more women in the field?
I think we are getting more women in the field. I see it from the number of PhD students in my institute and in general in astronomy. I think that we get a very large number of master students and PhDs in astronomy. There's probably even more than 50% of PhDs going into astronomy are women nowadays. Certainly, yes.
Well, that's good to hear, Dr. Israeli, and I thank you so much. You and Dr. Hawking have contributed so much to our knowledge of the world around us and above us.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you.
Dr. Garrick Israeli and earlier Stephen Hawking. And you can find out more about STARMUS at www.starmus.com. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. And I'll see you next time. On Larry King Now, he's one of the most brilliant minds in the universe. My exclusive conversation with Stephen Hawking.
Why do the universe and all the laws of nature exist? Are they necessary? In one sense they are, because otherwise we wouldn't be here to ask the question. But is there a deeper reason?
You've been warning people about the dangers of artificial intelligence.
I don't think advances in artificial intelligence will necessarily be benign. Once machines reach the critical stage of being able to evolve themselves, we cannot predict whether their goals will be the same as ours.
Plus, astrophysicist Dr. Garrick Israeli.
The sky is mysterious because we cannot reach the sky. It's in human nature. When you can touch something, when you can get close, then you lose your interest. And that never happens with stars, and it never happens with universe. We think that this is probably the most mysterious things in nature.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to this very special edition of Larry King Now. My guest today needs little introduction. The world's most famous scientist and intellectual, a man of incomparable genius, Stephen Hawking. Stephen is Director of Research at the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics and founder of the Center for Theoretical Cosmology at the University of Cambridge. He joins us today from the STARMUS Festival in the Canary Islands. I last spoke to Stephen in 2010, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to pick his miraculous brain again. Stephen, when we last spoke 6 years ago, you said that mankind was in danger of destroying ourselves by our greed and stupidity. Have things gotten better or worse since then?
We certainly have not become less greedy or less stupid. 6 years ago I was warning about pollution and overcrowding. They have gotten worse since then. The population has grown by 500 million since our last meeting, with no end in sight. At this rate, it will be 11 billion by 2100. Air pollution has increased over the past 5 years. More than 80% of inhabitants of urban areas are exposed to unsafe levels of air pollution.
Stephen, what's the biggest problem facing humanity today?
The increase in air pollution and the emission of increasing levels of carbon dioxide. Will we be too late to avoid dangerous levels of global warming?
You've been warning people about the dangers of artificial intelligence. How seriously are governments taking this warning?
Governments